Today, I'll be continuing with my scheduled discussion and point spread prediction videos. Today, I'll be doing Southern Cal. Southern Cal is one of the most, or maybe the most, disappointing team from last season. Uh, Before the season started, they were expected to be a team that had a chance to go to the college football playoff or at least win 10 games, and they didn't come anywhere close to that. Ended up losing 5 games. Before the season started, the schedule for the first half looked like it was going to be pretty easy, and then the second half really hard. It looked like 5 of their last 6 games were going to be hard, and uh, they would probably be able to start off 6-0, and they did start off 6-0, and then uh, they lost all 5 of those 6 games that were expected to be tough. So that showed how good they really were. They just weren't that good, and they easily could have been 5-7 because they also had 2 games that they just barely won. And their defense last season was the worst in the Power Five, one of the worst I've ever seen. It was horrible. Uh, they averaged allowing almost 35 points per game, and they in the opener let a non-Power Five team, uh, San Jose State, uh, score 28 points on them, and I knew after that happened that it was the same type of Lincoln Riley defense, and then they let Arizona State, who had one of the worst, if not the worst, offense in the Power Five. Maybe Iowa's was worse, but I can't think of anyone else that had a worse offense than them. They let them score 28 points, and then they let uh, Coach Prime's Colorado Clown Show score 41 points on them. That was pretty bad if you let his team score that much on you. Uh, and then they let a Utah team that had uh, a horrible quarterback, one of the worst I've ever seen. Uh, they let them score 34 points on them, and that quarterback outplayed Caleb Williams in that game. So that's pretty bad if a quarterback like him could outplay a quarterback like Caleb Williams. And then they let a mm, terrible California team score 49 points on them, and then they let Notre Dame score 48 on them, and then Washington scored 52 on them, and then Oregon scored 36 on them, and then uh, UCLA scored 38 on them. So it was just terrible. Uh, they couldn't tackle, they couldn't cover wide receivers. Just the same old stuff that uh, you've seen from Lincoln Riley's defenses since he's been a head coach. And when someone has been uh, a head coach for 7 years like he has and has never even had an average defense, you just can't really expect him to have one now. I know he brought in UCLA's defensive coordinator who did pretty well with their defense last year. Uh, and he brought in a lot of transfers that will start this year on defense. But still, their defense was so bad last year that even if Lincoln Riley is doing the right thing now on defense, I don't think it can be fixed in one year. Uh, it would probably take a couple of years to get it to be average. Uh, and if the head coach is not going to care about the defense and just ignore it like he seemed to do since he's been a head coach, really it doesn't matter who the defensive coordinator is or who you've got playing on the defense. Like uh, he could hire a Kirby Smart to be his defensive coordinator, And if he's going to ignore the defense, their defense would likely still be bad. So he's going to have to start coaching the defense too a lot better. Uh, and Caleb Williams is a big loss. He's probably going to be the number one pick in the draft this year. But I liked how that backup quarterback Miller Moss played in the bowl game. He looked really good, so they should still have a good quarterback. But I know Lincoln Riley's an offensive expert and the best play caller in the country, but uh, their offensive line last year was horrible. Caleb Williams was having to run from defenses as soon as the ball was snapped. It's amazing that he was able to uh, get them so many big plays last year, having to run from defenses that much. And the offensive line played better in the bowl game for that other quarterback. So, uh, really, if the offensive line can improve, they'll be fine on offense, I think. Of course, they lose a lot of playmakers, but uh, Lincoln Riley has always been good about uh, bringing in good receivers and running backs. Mm, and I think that they could be better this year, uh, but still, with the defense, it's kind of just a have to see it to believe it thing with Lincoln Riley. Uh, mm, so they uh, have a really tough non-conference schedule this year. Uh, of course, they're moving to the Big Ten, so it's a much different schedule. But they have the opener against LSU in Las Vegas, Nevada, so a neutral game. That's going to be a really tough one. And I talked about this game some in the LSU video, so if you want to hear more about that, you can watch that one. But I do think it's going to be a good game and one that USC will have a chance in, and one that, as a college football fan, I'm really looking forward to watching. It'll be a Sunday game, probably Sunday night. Uh, and then they're keeping their rivalry with Notre Dame. Uh, they do get that one at home, so that'll help. But still, these are two pretty good teams that they're having to play in the non-conference, LSU and Notre Dame, and they only get one easy win in the non-conference against Utah State. They shouldn't have any problem there. Uh, and then uh, I like where the first week off comes right before a road game against Michigan, which Michigan's team that just won it all last year, uh, and it's a road game. So even though Michigan won't be quite as good, probably that's still going to be a really tough one. Uh, mm, so that's a tough way to start their conference schedule. Uh, and then the week after that, they've got a game against Wisconsin that could be pretty tough, mm, especially if they're not any better. Uh, mm, and then October 12th, they have a game against Penn State. That one's going to be really tough, but uh, they'll have a better chance with it being at home. Uh, and then on the road at Washington on November 2nd, that one could be tough, or it could even not be. I just don't really think Washington's going to be near as good this year. Mm, mm. And then they're keeping their rivalry with UCLA on uh, November 23rd. It's a road game, but they're in the same town, so it's not really much of a road game. Uh, mm, they'll have a good chance in that one because UCLA I don't think is going to be uh, that good. Uh, and good news is they don't have to play Ohio State or Oregon this year. And uh, I know Michigan, was the best team last year in the country, but Ohio State and Oregon, I think, are the top two teams in the Big Ten this year. At least it looks like that right now. So of the three of those teams, Michigan's probably the team that you would want to play this year. Uh, so not a horrible schedule, but not a real easy one either. Maybe a little bit easier than last year's. Mm, so now I'll move on to the prediction. Uh, so if you haven't seen how I do the point spread scale, go back and watch the Ohio State video. I explain it in that one. But games in the green are games where I think USC will be favored to win by a blowout, 20 or more points, and I see one of those, Utah State. And then uh, uh, the games in the purple are games where I think they'll be favored to win by about a touchdown, 6 to 9 points, and I see four of those: Minnesota, Maryland, Rutgers, and Nebraska. Mm, And the games in the pink are games where I think they'll be favored to win by about a field goal, 1 to 5 points. I see two of those. Mm, Wisconsin and UCLA. Mm, And then uh, the games in the black are the toss up games where there won't be a favorite, at least you wouldn't think so right now. And there's one of those, Washington. Mm, And games in the gray are games where I think USC will be about a field goal underdog, 1 to 5 points. And I see two of those, Penn State and Notre Dame. Mm, well, three actually, LSU being the other one. Uh, and then uh, the games in the yellow are games where I think there'll be about a touchdown underdog, so 6 to 9 points. And I see one of those, Michigan. Uh, mm, so Utah State, they should be favored by about four touchdowns, about 28 points in that one. Mm, Should have no problem there. But that's the only given win on the schedule for USC this year. Uh, mm, so Minnesota right now, USC would probably be about a 6 point favorite in that game. Uh, and then probably about 6 points against Maryland. Uh, and then Rutgers, probably uh, because it's at home, they'd be about a 7 point favorite in that one. Uh, and then uh, probably they'd be about a 7 point favorite against Nebraska also. Uh, and Wisconsin, uh, they're only probably going to be favored in that one because it's a home game, and probably just by 2 or 3 points. Mm, in UCLA, they'll probably be favored in that one by about three. Mm, And mm, LSU, right now, I'd say mm, that USC would be about a 5 point underdog in that one. Uh, that one could even end up in the yellow when it comes time for it. But for now, I'll say uh, they won't quite be a touchdown underdog. Mm. And Penn State, that's only in the gray because it's a home game for USC. If that game was at Penn State, USC would, I think, be a touchdown underdog. But because it's mm, at USC, probably like 4 or 5 points, they would be an underdog. Uh, and Notre Dame, mm, they'd probably be an underdog by 3 or 4 in that one. Because Notre Dame looks like a better team right now to me than USC. Uh, and then uh, Washington, uh, that's really a tough one because I know with it being at Washington, you would probably think that Washington would be a little bit of a favorite in it uh, because they were a better team than USC was last year, uh, and I just don't really think right now that Washington's going to be uh, even as good as USC this year. So mm, could end up being that Washington's favored by a little bit, or even maybe USC's favored by a little bit. But for now, I just decided to leave that one as a toss up. Mm, And then Michigan, uh, I'd say that USC would be about a 6 point underdog in that game. Uh, and something else I forgot to mention, where the second week off comes, it comes right before a game against Nebraska, and it's a home game too. So really, that's not the best time for a second week off. You'd rather have it before a game like Penn State or uh, Notre Dame, but mm, still, overall, not a horrible schedule. Uh, It'll give them a chance to have a better season. Uh, mm, and that will be it with this video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll make another one in a couple of days.